Hello everybody, welcome back to the kitchen, but don't worry, we're going out to the shop soon enough. What we have in front of us is the start of my next insane, ridiculous project. Well, maybe not too ridiculous, but you can probably figure out where we're going here. I recently got on the kick for the perfect kitchen knife. Perfect, according to me, anyway. So this is my favorite knife. I had one previous to this, almost identical, a little bit longer, which I liked a little bit more. This is called a Santoku style blade, Japanese style, Japanese shape. Of course, this particular one is Americanized with a full tang and everything. But I really like the general shape. I like the fairly flat edge. I don't like a lot of curve to the edge, like your typical chef knife. I don't do a lot of roll cutting. I do a lot more push cutting. But there is just a little bit of belly where I can roll the knife up and down if I so desire. And there's also just a little bit of tip if I need a tip for something. If I need more tip, I can just grab a different knife, a boning knife or a paring knife or something like that. 99% of all my kitchen work is done with this knife. But it's a little bit small, it's a little bit lightweight. Also, the problem I have with this knife and every other knife out there that I can see is that if I'm kind of powering through something a little more firm, I'm going to hold the knife like this, and my knuckles are further down than the edge of the knife. So to prevent my knuckles from smashing into the cutting board, I have to modify my grip more like this, which is hard on my hands, my wrists, everything. Like, you look how my wrist is cranked. It's fine if you're just doing celery or something, or doing finer work, but for harder cutting, I like to hold it like this, and it's just not possible. So I want a wider edge, or excuse me, a wider blade. I also like this knife. It's just the handle's a little bigger, a little more controllable because of the bigger handle. So what I started out by doing, I traced both of these knives on top of each other on a piece of paper, and I will continue to modify and draw over this as I desire to make what I think will be the perfect knife. So here's what I came up with. I did some extra drawing and sketching and everything, and I cut this out. It looked pretty good to make sure that it would be well liked in my hand, and obviously this wet noodle is not the best thing to pretend that you're cutting with. I made a quick rough cardboard cutout just so I can get a better idea in a few minutes if it felt good. The length felt good. My knuckles are clearing the cutting board, and I think I'm pretty happy with this. So the next step, I blackened all the edges on both sides of this pattern. So I'm going to bring this over to my copier, and I can make copies of it now that it has a dark edge for the copier to pick up. And so now I can make a couple replicas of this pattern to transfer onto my piece of steel without ruining my one pattern. On the topic of steel, went on good old McMaster-Carr, got a piece of 1095 plain carbon steel. And yes, the carbon steel will require some more care and feeding than a stainless, but I believe, I'm actually not even sure, but there's enough heat treatment information for 1095 to make your head spin. And some of the more fancy steels, the stainless steels, all that stuff, they have most likely, I think, even more complicated heat treatment processes. I suppose I could send it out for heat treatment, but I'll just do it myself. I mean, I'm making my own knife. I could just buy something and just be happy enough with it. So 1095, I think this is 103 or 6 or something thousandths thick. This knife is like 95 or 100. So I gave myself just a little extra meat since the blade is going to be a little bit wider or, deeper than this. And it'll give me a little extra material to grind away if I accidentally grind too much or need to grind out some blemishes or whatever. So the next step, like I said, I'm going to make some copies of this with some spray adhesive, glue it on here, and trim it out. So here's the rough cutout pattern. As you see, I left some extra material when I cut this on the bandsaw. a vertical bandsaw. Didn't make a video of that. You know, I figured know what a bandsaw looks like. So here's the rough pattern. I'm gonna do some fine-tune grinding on it to get it to shape. I already started a little bit. I was playing around with this new grinder. I've got a separate video reviewing this belt sander grinder attachment for a bench grinder. And let's go at it. Alright, so I got my blank pretty much ready to go. You see I blued a little section here, more than I needed, but I want to decide where my grind line is going to be. I'm gonna choose here and somewhere in this vicinity here, and just scribe it. And the other thing I did, I blued the edge, or this isn't bluing, this is layout dye, which happens to be blue. But I blued the edge, and I'm giving myself a center reference line. You see I already started it here, so we're at 113 thou thick. So I'll choose half of that. Let's call that 55. And just use the calipers as a scribe. Now I have a reference for what center is, so when I'm grinding, I can grind both sides evenly, in theory anyway. If this was a thicker blade, I might scribe two lines, one to one side and one to the other, leaving myself a section in the middle that I'm not going to grind. But this is so thin, if I try to scribe multiple lines, they're just going to get lost. And I think I'm going to have a hard enough time making everything perfect as it is. So, you know, you just try to do the best you can, and then you don't have to worry about saying, oh, I should have done this a little better, because if you try your best, that's all you can hope for. So anyway, so I'm just going to aim for this center line, and by eye I'm going to stay off of that a little bit, because I don't want to go right to an edge at this point. I'm going to heat treat first and then do a final grind to the final shape and dimension. Lastly, I made this little thing. Just two chunks of steel, drilled and tapped one side, and the other side I have made a clearance hole for some 1/4 bolts. Of course, you could just drill straight through both and have a nut on the back side. I just opted for tapping instead. So now I can clamp this down here and have something to butt up against the platen of the grinder, so I don't have to go by eye every single time I put this up to the grinding belt. As it turned out, and I'm not upset about this at all, because everything was so gradual, there isn't even a cut-in grind line here. Okay, so now the last thing that I'm going to do before we go to heat treat is pop some holes in the handle, or in the tang for the handle. So I already sat and thought about it and drew some Sharpie marks and wiped them off and drew them again. Obviously there's no right or wrong way to do it. I just did it till it looked right. Alright, well, by some miracle I managed to find a actual quarter-inch drill bit in my pile of drills, and I believe it's actually sharp. And I have a brand used fresh 2x4 in the drill press vise, not even all chewed up, so we got a pretty good hope of this thing being nice and flat, drilling a nice square hole. And I checked, and it just so happens that the blade will hit against the back part of the drill press, so I don't have to worry about the drill catching and spinning this thing around. Oh god, that would be terrifying. Let's see, is my arm's definitely going to be in the way of the camera, huh? I did center punch the holes off camera. Whoa, hey, see, just like that. Here's my chamfer. I don't know, I think that's 60 degree. It doesn't really matter. Just going to knock the burr off of both sides, and this will also remove those sharp corners that will be a stress razor during heat treating. Even though obviously I'm not going to heat treat the handle, it'll still help. Also, on that note, there's a reason why I didn't put a sharp corner in here. I radius that because that would definitely be another stress razor too. Alright everybody, there's the end of part 1. Part 2, we're going to do hardening and tempering, the heat treatment process. There's a whole lot to learn about that. I've watched a bunch of videos, and of course I have past experience of knife making and blacksmithing and stuff. So I think it'll turn out pretty well, but that remains to be seen. So this is the end of part 1. All the stock removal, all the shaping, all that prep work. Now make sure to hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button too, of course, but hit the subscribe button over there somewhere, and you'll keep up to date with the next step of this project. Thanks for watching, everybody. Come on back for more.